We have another fun one, ladies and gents. This one, though, is probably one of the most important things as a business owner that you need to do, you need to plan for, and you need to do it now. Wherever you're at in your business, you need to do it now. And that is exit planning with a business owner. I've got Tracy Gunn on. I'm really excited about this. I told her off camera that I'm excited for a multitude of reasons. Again, everyone should do it. We don't really talk about it much. And then, my own uncle is ready for it as well. So I'm here to learn along with all of you. I just get to ask all the questions. So without further ado, Tracy, thanks for being here. And why don't you tell us your story and where you came from, what you got going on, and how you're currently sitting in a candy shop in North Carolina.
Totally. So yeah, I kind of refer to it as my cautionary tale, right? That I feel like as a business owner, I was running four successful businesses, meaning they weren't in the hole, right? They weren't making me millions, but they were like most business, like 99.9% of us, right? Under a million.
Right.
And I had four of them and I was managing them all. Uh, Two candy stores, two restaurants, one humongous restaurant that kind of put me over the edge. And my daughter had a grandbaby, which is why I'm in North Carolina. And I was like, all of a sudden, like I looked around the bar one night at like 1 a.m. The band's packing up, my staff is grumping, and I was like, I don't want to do this. This is not fun anymore. I don't want to do this. And then all of a sudden I was like, I'm done. And so I contacted a broker and was like, okay, I'll just sell. No biggie, right? That's what everybody's like. They're going to sell their house. They think, I'll just hire a broker. Same for business. We think, I'll just hire a broker. Everybody will want my job that nobody wants, right? So, like, and, which is scary in itself because, like, you have to show them your books, you have to show them everything, you have to show them behind the curtain, right? The part we don't want anybody to see.
Right.
And so, I hired a broker. He was someone I knew, had no personal grudge or anything. And he was like, don't bother. Just liquidate everything. And I was broken. Like I cried. I had a moment and I was like, are you kidding? Like I've been working for at that time it was like 14 or 15 years for this big exit, thinking someday this will not just pay for my stuff, but pay me back. And you're telling me it's a no-go? Like, what? And so, I had to think about it. And I had to think about, well, number one, why does he think that it's not worth anything? Which I had never thought about what makes a business valuable before, right? I just had never thought about it. Like, it was valuable to me because it was paying for all my things and it was growing, but it wasn't valuable to him and why, right? So I had to learn about what that meant. But also, I had to figure out, is he right? Is he right that there's nothing worth salvaging here? And if he is, what do I do about that? Do I just, like, am I burnt out enough that I think I'm out of here? Right? Set the match, watch it burn, right? Break off the pieces. Or could I do something about it, right? And I think as entrepreneurs, we're like, how can I pivot? How can I fix this? Right. And this was pre COVID. So this was before I got my real pivot muscles going. Right. This was like, I'm just in it thinking, what do I do? And so that's kind of what happened. And so I set myself a date, like a deadline, which number one, most important thing to do. And second, I backed into it like, okay, what can I fix to make this valuable? What can I fix to make this attractive to somebody? And that's kind of what I did. And that's kind of how Exitable was born, this business, right? That I'm doing now because I realized, gosh, why didn't somebody tell me this stuff? Like, why didn't I know this? I'm smart running four businesses. How dumb could I be? But I didn't know. And the thing is almost nobody knows. Almost nobody knows what their business is worth. Almost nobody knows what makes it valuable or not. They have some ideas. And they don't know that they need to plan ahead. They just think, oh, somebody will buy it. But that's not true.
No,
That
it
was
is
my
not.
very long story.
No, it wasn't very long. It was great. It was fantastic. No, a lot of people don't know. And we do this when we're working with business owners, younger business owners who are just getting started. And it's not an age thing, right? The young business itself
Sure.
is you need to think about your exit, what you want it to be. We don't have to plan for it per se yet.
Right.
But what type of exit do you want? Do you want it to be a transition? or do you want to be bought out? Because from a book standpoint or even a value standpoint, those can be two different things, right?
Right.
And you need to be able to structure your business that way.
Yep.
When we talk about exit planning, and I know that's like the marketing term that we all use,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
really all we're talking about is like, how do you leave your business, right? How when you're
Right.
done, what can you do and how do you do it?
Right.
When you first did that and went to a broker, besides, basically stripping down naked and saying, here's all my stuff,
Yeah,
judge
right.
me, judge everything
Check
I
me
have.
out.
Right, right. Um, Besides that point, where were you in terms of the structure part of your business? Was it like all over the place? Was it easy? Like, where were you with the business structure itself?
So I was very blessed. Think of God blessing me and sending me an angel. When I first started my first business, my candy store, somebody handed me the email within the first 2 months. And so I never really thought about it. I was like, I could do this, right? I stopped homeschooling. My kids all went to school. I was in this life transition with my ex-husband. It was complicated. And I wanted to build something that was mine, right? And I got to control. I never thought about like, do I want to own a business or do I want to run a business, right? Two different things. But very rarely do we think about that. And thankfully, Lisa gave me a book and I knew from the beginning I didn't want to be the candy lady behind the register. It's fun. I love my customers. I love to see them grow up. 18 years later, I've seen them all, right? However, I just knew that would not be attractive for me long term, right? I like the start, the 0 to 1, not the 1 to 10, right? And so I knew going in, like I would have to do a lot of those technical things at first, but the goal would be to get me out of it, to systematize, to figure out how it could run without me, and they would have the same experience without, right? And so from the get go, I always set it up with that in mind. And when you always have that time at the beginning where you're figuring it out, right? Where you're going to have to be in all things. So the goal is to get yourself out of it, right? To not be Tracy driven. And so when I had all four, the only reason I'd be able to have four businesses is that other people were working. I had 42 staff at my highest. It's a lot of staff.
That's a lot.
Right. And not the easiest staff, right? Restaurants and retail are you're talking like low level, not skill, but like just lower level income. There's often like restaurant industry, everything you could possibly think bad does happen, right? If you've seen The Bear, that TV show, it really symbolizes exactly what most restaurants are like and the insanity of the staff and just all the things, right? But I wouldn't be able to do that myself if I was just dependent on me. So I had systems in place, but I was the engine that was pushing everything. I was the octopus making sure everything got touched, everything was moving forward. And that's the piece for me that I think where I had the gap, right? When we talk about setting the exit plan, yes, it is how do you want to leave or what is, but I also look at it like, what does the finish line look like? Like you go on vacation, you don't get on the plane and not know where you're going,
Right.
right? Spend all that money and make a plan and you don't know where you're going, right? Same thing in a business. Like you don't spend, a decade working in a business and not have a clear sense of where you're going. And yet most of us are just like, we're like that way, west,
Right.
not LA,
North,
right?
forward. Yeah.
Right. Forward and more. That's
Yes.
usually our thought, right? More money, more customers, more profit, and that way. And we'll try 1,000 different things to make those things happen, but because we haven't pinpointed like the destination, by pinpointing that destination, it filters everything, right? Like you mentioned about like, do you want to like have a transition? Do you want to sell? Like, I'll give an example. Like I had a gentleman I was working with and he had three businesses. He actually had a really good system, right? He was working minimally. So that's a great place to start to sell.
Mhm.
But for each business, the model was going to be different to exit because for his one that was an oil company, the people that were going to buy that are other oil companies. They don't care about his systems. They don't care about like what they want? They want his customers. That's
Yep.
all they want. And he, in turn, also wants his customers taken care of after 40 years, right? His exit is very different than somebody who's like a brand. Let's say it was a guy who was just buying his first company and he was buying an oil company. He cares about the system. So, right? Do you see how that's different? And what you work on and improve is going to be different depending on what the exit looks like. So, when we do the exit planning, we talk about what does the destination look like? What's the target? What's the number you need to leave with, right? And how do you get there? And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Sometimes that's by acquisition, right? Because you put a few businesses, like a few candy stores together, is worth way more than one by itself, right? The multiple's higher. I don't even have to improve profitability. I just have to put them together and it's worth 4x instead of 1x, right? So there's all kinds of strategies about that. But when you think about that exit, you're thinking, gosh, what do I want? And even as a new business, you should be thinking, what does this look like in 20 years? Do I even want to be here in 20 years? Do I want to have 20 or do I want to have one? When you nail those things down, all your decisions, it kind of like removes shiny objects because you're filtered by what you've already decided. But by not deciding at all, you don't have a filter. So everything's just coming in and you're in 1,000 directions.
Different.
So sorry, I might have gone off track
No,
there,
you're
but
good.
I think, for me, I had my systems in place. I knew I didn't want to be there all the time, but they weren't making enough to hire somebody full time at each.
Yeah. And I think
And that's what I had to work on.
yeah, the important part you said there was you knew you didn't want to be in it. And so let me ask you this: when you're thinking about exiting and being at, either selling and trade, it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
If the business owner is still in it, doesn't that make it much harder to sell or to transition or
Absolutely.
to exit?
Yeah. I look at, so when we coined this term exitable, which isn't really a word, but it so defines exactly what it is, right?
Yeah.
Like the business should be exitable in order to be transferable and sellable. And like the litmus test is, could you go away for a month and not have it be a disaster, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not a disaster. Does it stay the same? Does it increase? Maybe you're the problem, right? That's certainly possible, right?
Valid.
But could it continue without you? Because nobody otherwise, the reality is most people are not going to buy your job. Because it's really not a job. I'm sorry, it's really not a business if you're working in it full time, right?
The
It's
job.
kind of like a full-time job for you,
Yep. Absolutely.
right? Now, you can fix it, meaning you could get somebody else in there, have less profitability, and now professionalize it, meaning you're not running it, you're just directing, right, from the overhead. Totally, that's a different scenario. Lots and lots, oh gosh. I hate to throw just percentages around, but the stats are only 1 in 10 listed businesses sell, maybe 2 in 10, depending, right? You've got 12 million baby boomers who are ready to sell because they're done, so they might have been done a few years ago, but then COVID, so they had to pivot. Some of them never came back, right? But if only 1 in 10 sell, why? Right? Is it because it's not really a good business? Is it because there's a problem with the broker, which certainly is possible, right? Is it because they didn't prepare? More often than not, it's because it's not really a solid business that can transfer well. That usually. And I think out of the 12 million business baby boomers, they've all worked themselves, like myself, where I got to be comfortable doing the things I was doing, right? Handling the things I chose to handle and delegating the rest, but I still was handling things. And that's right. So we make our lives more comfortable. We make our prison more comfortable. Put some cushions and some bed, right?
Yeah.
But it's still a prison. It still can't, it's grown up around you, probably despite you, and kind of trapped you, right? And fixing that can be really easy depending on the exit. But recognizing that that's kind of what you have, Like the hardest conversation to have with an owner is that you don't have a sellable business. Not only is it really not worth anything, right? Because that's another hard part, right? Because values are low, right? If you're making less than 200,000 in profit, it's probably only worth about 200,000. Like it's
Right.
probably a
Yeah.
1x,
Yeah.
right? Because the multiples, you're banking on the profitability of the business, right? And so if you're involved, the likelihood that without you it will be profitable is lower. So it's a lower multiple, just the way it is. Now you can fix that. But like the reality is most of us think our business is going to be worth all of the name and this and that. But like the reality is it's only worth what it's going to bring in,
Mhm.
right? And the higher the confidence in the purchase, the higher the value, right? Based on your profits. And so fixing those things, you can do it. You just have to know to do it. Most people don't even think about it enough to know to do it.
We talk about mindset a lot in our
Yeah.
podcast, whether you have to have the positive money mindset or from a personal perspective, like you need to make business decisions within your own personal finances. All
Yeah.
of this is around a mindset.
Yeah.
Talk to us about your specific mindset change and then maybe a story from a client's change when you recognized, oh shit, this isn't sellable. It might not be
Yeah.
worth what it is. How do I overcome my own, initial defense mechanisms
Yeah.
and be able to move forward to recognize that, hey, I need to change my mind because it's not where it's supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I get back into the setting the date thing. There's just something, it's like that's the theory about like you get engaged and you look at your ring and all that, right? But until you set a wedding date, right, and book the hall, are you really getting married or is it just fantasy, right? But once you set that date, all the crap that has to get done between now and then has to get done. And that's why setting the date. And so for me, setting the date really, like, I gave myself an exit. I was like, okay, by the end of this year, this was in like July of 2019. And I said, by Christmas, like by the end of the year, I'm done. So I can fix this and let's see what I can fix, right? To make it more attractive, to make it easily transferable, to make it more profitable, all those things. And so for me, once I set that date, I was like, okay, I could do anything for 6 months, right? It wasn't so painful anymore. I wasn't so resentful and frustrated. Now I had a very different view. So it was like putting on exit glasses, right? It was like, okay, I'm not looking at all the possibilities. I'm looking about what gets me, right? I've got the date. If the countdown has begun, what do I need to get done between now and then? And that's kind of how, for me, that shifted everything for me. That setting the date. I know it sounds really simple, but it really changes your perspective on what you're doing, right? It narrows, it automatically filters, right? And so, and some of that is not just, okay, I want to be out of this business, but some of that is, what do I actually want? Maybe I want to do something else. Maybe, what people are selling, there's a lot of reasons people are selling. They're burnt out. Maybe they're getting divorced. Maybe they have grandchildren, want to be more around them more, like that happened for me. Maybe they just have a new passion project. I mean, there's a lot. There's health,
Right.
where I just am opening my candy store. The lady that I was supposed to take over her space, she got cancer. And so she couldn't run her business anymore. She was a solopreneur. And so they had to like do this whole like lease like termination through the courts and whatever, right? But like that happens. And so people are exiting. They aren't as I sell. They're exiting for all different reasons. Maybe it's just not making enough money. And they're tired of trying, right? So for all those reasons, knowing what you actually want versus what you have is a part of that, right? And that's the motivator. That for me, that's the mindset. It's like every once in a while, someone will come to me, especially in my hometown, and say, "We have this beautiful restaurant. You should open it. You should take it over." And for a minute, I'm like, "Ooh, an opportunity! Yay!"
Shiny.
Right? And I look and I go see it, and I get all excited. And I dream about all the things it could be, and then reality, my goals remind me, remember how you said you wanted to travel the country and not be tied to a place or an insane business? Remember that, Tracy? A profit, like a business that has low margins, like remember, and crazy people. Remember that? Yes. Okay. Nope. Thank you very much. I'm on my way. Right. But it keeps me, even if I get off track a second, what I have already determined for myself pulls me back. Right. Because it doesn't align with what I really want. Right. And that is part of that whole mindset thing. It's like when you realize this is not what you want, figuring out what you actually want is different. And I'll tell you, when I started to make changes, especially in my big business, I had a 6,500 square foot restaurant. So it was like the bar sat 40. It was big. We did weddings for the hotel. We had our own private catering room. We had live bands. We had a bar of 40. Like it was a lot. And when I decided that I was just going to do this, within a month or so, I didn't hate it as much anymore because I got rid of the things that made me crazy. Right. And at that point, because I had given myself 6 months, it's like month two, I was like, this isn't so bad. Right. Because I had gotten myself out of a lot
Yeah.
of the things. I had figured out some things that were not working, that were making me crazy, all because I was thinking, what can I get rid of? What can I give to somebody else? Whether it's turning on my customer loyalty program and having a customer list, or training my kitchen manager to do the liquor inventory, or whatever it is, right? All of a sudden, those things were off my list and not only made my business more valuable, more profitable. Like managing the liquor, finding theft made me more profitable, which made it more expensive, right? Made me more valuable because I was
Selfish.
more
Yep.
profitable. So like, but again, only because I was thinking about that did that even come into mind. I would have just kept going and adding things and trying
Yeah.
to figure out the next event, right?
Yeah.
Like so, and then like I have another gentleman, Jim, that we worked with, and he came in thinking, I'm gonna start on my staff. But in breaking down what do you want, what do you need, what is the number you need to reach getting out of this, he realized that they probably, number one, weren't going to be capable of doing it, right? Because he was still kind of in it. And then he thought, gosh, I'm going to keep the business, meaning the real estate, so he still have income from that. And then he realized that he thought about, growth through acquisition. I think he changed his mind about it. But then he actually wound up finding a buyer for the business with some seller financing. So he can sell it for higher. He has long term, he saves some taxes. But like he came into it thinking, yes, I want to be done. And this is the easiest way. I could just say, here you go. But he realized, wait a minute, that doesn't, like, I want X for it. I want this much more for it. And so again, just by setting the date and figuring out what he wanted, he was able to filter and work towards it. It starts in the mind, right?
Yeah. Absolutely does. What's a realistic date, right? Like, obviously, we all can set a date and go at it, right? But like,
Hmm.
is 6 months, is 12 months, a good enough time frame
Yeah,
for all the things you got to do? And then we'll follow up and talk about all the things that you need to do. But
sure.
what is a realistic date for people that are listening going, oh, I can get this done in 6 months? Now it depends on the business, and I
Totally.
get that, but like,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
what would be realistic?
Well, I mean, for myself, I gave myself 6 months because I thought I could do this 6 months, but no more. Like I had to set something realistic for me. Because the nice thing about setting a date is that it can change. You're the boss,
Yeah.
right? If all of a sudden half of the things that annoy you disappeared, 6 months doesn't seem so long, does it?
Right.
Right? You're like, well, I could do this another year, maybe, right? But now you're doing it with intent, right? So the way we work with people is we help them figure out what they want and not just like, I want to hang out with my grandkids, but like, what number do you need to get? And how can we get you there, right? Are you close, right? We call it bridging the gap, right? And then we kind of lay out we call it the opportunity roadmap, right? Of fixing your basic stuff, right? That maybe should be there but aren't because you've just figured it out, right? Like all of us, we're just figuring it out as we go,
Right.
right? Fixing the basics. And then what can be value adds? So, like, what could help grow it. And whether that's growth by acquisition or streamlining the product line or raising prices or all those things, right? And so, to do that, like you can start there and then you back into it. So 6 months, like I found a buyer in 3 months and he approached me in my bar. He had always dreamed of owning a bar. He was a customer at my counter. I had been talking about had a grandbaby, I want to go, da da da, because I talk a lot, right? And I was just schmoozing it up. And after a couple months, he was like, "Would you sell it to me?" And I was like, "Heck yeah!" Right? I went from nobody wanting it, right, and give it up to somebody actually wanting it for money. Sure,
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
right? Absolutely. So, I mean, it can happen really fast. It just depends what your goals. And I don't even think it's just your goals. It's what you need, right? Because again, when we talk about the 12 million boomers, like they don't have a retirement plan. This is
Correct.
it, right? So that makes it even more important for them to dive into getting this crap fixed and enhancing the value so they can get the number. Because I think after running a business for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you should get paid,
Mhm.
right? But the exit, so I had another gentleman, Don, he had really 5 businesses, but he had been running it for 52 years, which is, think about that, crazy.
Yeah.
And he was an importer for like motorcycle pieces that they create. So he manufactured, he imports, he had retail locations, he had wholesale, and he had e-com. So 5 businesses. And he was really running them, right? And he recognized, crap, I'm not going to be able to do this in 6 months. For him, that was not realistic because he had too many working
Yeah.
pieces. It was fresh off of COVID, right? Numbers were down. So what did he do is he really figured out what pieces would be the most valuable and he focused on those and kind of carved off the others and just sold them, let them go, right? So there's a lot of different strategies, but the goal is to figure out what you need as well as what you want, right? And those two things can be the same. And if you are somebody who is full, oh,
There it is.
FedEx, hold on.
Yep.
Hello. Sorry about that. I knew it. I warned you.
Yeah, you did. You did.
Okay. I don't know if you need to mark it or whatever. Sorry about
No,
that.
we're good. I'll cut that out. I'm not worried about it.
Okay. So I forgot even what we were doing because he distracted me. But like that, the goal. Remind me, where were we?
Yes, let's just start a little bit different. So
Okay.
you had mentioned timing. It was 6 months for you.
Yeah.
Really, it's about your needs and wants. And I want to throw
Yeah.
something into that is they can be the same, but also you need to be realistic as well,
Yeah.
right? And
You
that's
do.
where I believe having a team in this atmosphere, and I'm going to ask you this because I don't know your process, but
Yeah.
having a team to help you understand what your true needs are.
Yeah.
So therefore, if your wants are drastically out of line, we can kind of fix that. If not, maybe they're the same. But what I mean by that is making sure you do have, your accountant and your planner and everyone in place for your personal side, because that's what it comes down to,
Right.
right? When you exit,
Yeah.
it's now all personal. There is no business. So that's what I feel like with the needs and wants. You got to be realistic as well and make
Yeah.
sure it just fits whatever personal goals you have. So talk
Yeah.
us through Exitable's process
Mhm.
and what people need to do prior to coming
Mhm.
with you, and then kind of what that whole thing looks like.
And actually, they honestly, we do a lot of free uh, workshops because there's such a huge knowledge gap on this subject, right? Like we talked about, like most people haven't even thought about it. They dream someday, right? Someday, but they really have no idea what makes their business valuable. They have no idea what it's worth, and they don't know what the process is, and they don't even understand often that their business is not sellable. Like they don't understand any of those things, right? So there is like we have to bring them along a step at a time, right? They just have in their mind that they want to sell, right? Or they want to retire. They have no idea that all these things are problems, right? It's like they don't even know they have a problem, right? They just think, oh, I'm going to sell next year. I'm going to sell. Like, oh, okay, sure. Sure you are, right? You're going to beat the odds, right? And by having these calls with them, right, where they can ask questions and like show them or talk about that. So thank you so much for being able to share this, is that it's raising the awareness that they have a problem to begin with, right? And I mean, it feels sad to say, hey, you have a business, you have a problem, but you do. I mean, that's what business ownership is. It's solving millions of problems all the time. But one of them is that you have a problem. Like if you ever want to sell or exit, now when I say exit, I mean that could be, that you just make it professionalized and you just keep the checks, right? And you don't have to show up anymore. Like how many business owners would still want to sell if they fixed all the things and they didn't have to be there ever, right? So
Right.
that's getting exitable, right? I mean, that's not a bad gig. Um, but for some, they just want to be done and move away and not think about it ever again. Now that is a different exit. And so our process is usually we have to educate on the front end about how do you value your business? I think every business owner on the planet should know what their business is worth. It's not a hard formula. I do a very basic one, like a down and dirty of like your profitability and your multiple. If it's under 200 is 1. That's it, right? If it's a little over, then maybe it's 2, right? But like it's just your profit from last year. Now you could tweak that, you could fix that. There's some add-ins that you can, make the profit higher. But also, if you're working in it, you got to make your profit lower because you got to pay someone to replace you. So like there is some wiggle room. But the down and dirty is, what's your profit? That's probably what it's worth for most business owners, right? I'm not talking about big multi-million
Right.
dollar
Different game.
conglomerates, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about like most owners who are never hitting $1 million a year in revenue. They're going to be 1x their profit, right? But everybody should know what their business is worth, right? It just grounds them in reality.
Yeah.
And then from there, so we help them do that. We help them to figure out an estimate of like what would your ideal date be? Because you can decide that. You can create that. There's none that's too short or too like we have some people like yesterday. I'm like, well, that's harder for me to do. But like, right? It's like 6 months, that's not too short. 3 months, not too short. Now, if the business is highly dependent on you, that's going to be a little bit harder. You're not going to get as much for it. But if you're flexible and open to creative financing, you probably can get your number, right? Because if you are flexible on terms, right, then you'll probably get your price, right? And it's just marketing for that and fixing some basic things. So our process in general is to educate on the front end so that they understand they have a problem, right? Because we think it's the most important part, right? They just don't know. And then once they do, we're like, do you want help figuring out what you want? So then it's figuring out what you want, setting the date, understanding what the value is, and then what are your opportunities, right? Now, part of the setting the target is what do you need your business to be worth? Like if you need to walk away with 300 grand and it's only worth 100, well, we have a little bit of work to do, right? You either have to just be realistic or you have to professionalize. Because if you professionalize, you could 3-4x it, right? Now, you won't make a lot of profit that year. However, if you professionalize, it probably is going to grow because, new fresh blood in the mix, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
So that's kind of the process. And then from there, we take them on. We do more of a group training where we bring them through the process for a year at a time just to get them to their exit. So, and keep them accountable, right? It's not just about information, it's about understanding what you can do and how you can figure out like where are the opportunities. It's taking an assessment of what your business is right now. So like for example, for myself, I didn't realize I didn't have a customer list at the time, right? I mean, I knew, I was walking around, right? I had, a texting program that I was paying for, but I turned on my loyalty program. I trained my staff to offer a free appetizer to sign people up. And within a month, I had like a 5,000 person list, knowing what they bought and how much they were worth and how often they came in. And that took a month. And all I did was turn the button on. It didn't cost me anything, right?
Yeah.
But I never thought that it was important, right? I
Right.
didn't, for whatever reason, I just didn't think about it. So I just turned that on. Now all of a sudden I had a list. I could predict how often Joe was going to come in and what he was going to buy every time,
Yeah.
right? Which makes it more valuable, right? So there are things you can do. But you often don't know them until somebody points it out, right? And the nice part about our process, you don't have to do it by yourself. You don't have to be, finally, you're at a level in your business where you don't have to be the one
One.
to save the pennies, right? And do the hard learning and trial and error, that you could just follow a proven process and get to the goal. I mean, that's the perk of like not being brand new, right? When you have to do everything.
Yeah. Do you need a business broker? Like, how important is that aspect? Say we've done that. We've got the process. We've cleaned it up to a degree of which we want it or whatever it is. Where does the business broker come in, and do you need one?
And again, for some, so one of the stats I used before, 1 in 10, right? Sometimes 2 in 10 don't
Yeah.
sell. There's a listed businesses. So keep in mind, those are not the ones that are off market, right? Those are not family acquisitions. That's listed. So the broker doesn't have a great track record. We'll just say that.
Right.
Well, let's just say half of it is on the business, right?
Yep.
So, but an honest broker would just say no, thank you to the business if it really wasn't sellable. But mostly what happens is brokers will list it, they'll do a thing, right? They'll do a write up, and then they just wait for somebody to call. Most brokers are just waiting, right? And so the broker, I mean, if you feel more comfortable in that process and you really want to lean on somebody's expertise, great. Make sure you hire somebody who's sold more than one a year, right? Because keep in mind, they're going to take 10%,
Yeah. Absolutely.
right? So they're going to take 10%. They're basically, you're going to, the other part, I was interviewing a broker, and I just want to understand the mindset.
Mhm.
The way that they see it is that they're protecting you, the owner, from the buyer. They're protecting you. Their job in their mind is to keep you safe.
Yeah.
But my belief is that if you got a buyer and seller together to sit down and have a meal and discuss the business and the possibilities and why you're leaving and all the honesty, you'd have a deal just like that.
Absolutely.
So the broker's in the way. Like they're building the wall. And for some people, that's what they're comfortable with, and that's fine. But understand that that is their mindset and that's their job. Legally, they're there to protect you from them
Right.
and will often kill the deal. Some
Yeah.
people call them deal killers.
Yeah. So if you don't have a broker, how do you find a buyer?
So, I mean, there's lots of ways. Like mine was sitting at my bar
Yeah.
talking about it. Like I shared with all my staff, I didn't want to be like, hey, by the way, I'm out of here, right? I told them that I would figure out something, that I'm giving myself 6 months to kind of improve things. It explained why I was making things better for them, easier for them, delegating, have systems so it wasn't so like based on me, which actually in the end was better for them, right? Because they just had to follow the system, right? Some of them got promotions, some of them had more responsibilities, so they made more money. But I was very open about it. Not everybody feels comfortable, and that's okay. But there are tons like Biz Buy Sell. You can list your own. What's it called? Oh gosh, it's escaping me. There's a ton of them now, and because there's so many that are on the market, that are going to be on the market, they're popping up all over. And really, I mean, there's whole, booms like Cody Sanchez, who's talking about buying boring businesses, old school like
Mhm.
businesses that have been around forever, because there aren't enough buyers. That's the other reason, right? We talked about not being a good business. We talked about the broker. The final one is there's not enough buyers. There are not 12 million people ready
Ready
to
to buy.
pony up and buy these boomers,
Yeah.
right? Each generation's getting smaller.
Mhm.
They actually had Cody Sanchez actually recently had a listing about they were giving away businesses for free in Japan because They didn't want to see it go away, but they didn't have anybody to buy it.
Right.
Because that's the most, I think it's the most harmful piece of this whole puzzle, is that once the business liquidates, all value just disappears.
Yeah.
50 years of value, right, in a community, right, serving customers and manufacture, like all the things, just evaporates.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's going to be really detrimental to our country, not to mention to the owner, to their community, right, to all of the people in that pond that the ripple will affect. And so, if you could sell and find a buyer, which I think you can, especially if you've prepared and most people haven't, you're good to go,
Yeah.
right? Because you know the things now, right?
Yeah.
There's millions who don't.
Yeah.
But you can find them everywhere. I mean, there are tons of listings between Facebook and social media and, Biz Buy Sell and FlipUp. That's the other one I was thinking of. There's tons of interest, but you could use a broker too. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just really about being educated about the process. And you're shifting, like we talked a little bit about mindset, you're shifting from growing, right,
Mhm.
and surviving to exiting. And it's just as simple as that. It's like turning a different direction. And that's what you're thinking about. And so all of a sudden you'll see buyers everywhere, because buyers are everywhere because they're people,
Yeah.
right?
And I'll add, whatever industry, service, whatever your business is, have colleagues, have masterminds, whatever you want to call it. But the more you know and network with, probably makes that a little easier too when you're
Yeah,
going to exit. So
absolutely.
make sure you're doing that. All right. As we
Yeah.
leave this off, what is one simple thing that you want to leave these business owners who are thinking about exit planning, or even new ones who are building and structuring for an exit at some point? What's one thing you want to leave with them?
Sorry, I couldn't hear. Ask me the question. The rain, they have the door open. The rain is loud. Sorry.
Oh, all right. No problem. What is one thing you want to leave these business owners who are listening with, that are either thinking about exiting now or building their business at some point to exit? What's one thing you want to leave with them?
I just think it's be aware. Like the biggest thing is be aware of the direction you're going. Nobody, like I said, nobody sets off on a plane to destination unknown. Oh, I mean, they do, but how do you know if you have enough gas to get there, right? Know where you're going. Take a minute. We're so busy. We're so in everything, juggling, solving problems, getting through the day. And then we have a whole life, hopefully outside of family and this and that, right? And vacation and spouses and health concerns. And if you just took 1 hour to jot down some notes about what does the end look like? I'm running a marathon. What does the finish line look like? Right? What's important to me on the other end of that? Because everybody's different. Some want a big paycheck, but others don't. Others just want to be done. And that's okay. Like I had a client who had a big catering business that was 35 years old. It was family run. He had made lots of money, but it was post COVID, so all of his numbers were low. And he had zero interest in building more. He didn't want to fix anything. He didn't want to wait. For him, he was cool. He set the date and he's like, I'm just going to close her up. And I was like, but you could have somebody come in from a culinary school. You could let them earn in. You could do all these things. And he was like, I don't want to. Thank you. Hold on a second. Do you need me to sign? Sorry. Yeah. There you go. Thank you. So I'm so sorry.
You're okay. No problem.
So let's go stop a second. Uh I was saying that they need to see, this is what happens. Entrepreneurship, your brain goes, tell me where we were again.
Yes. You need to be aware,
Yeah.
ultimately, right? You need to be aware of where you want to go, what you want to
Yeah.
do. And
Yeah.
that's what you wanted to leave everyone with. And that's
Yeah.
probably the definition of exitable, right? Being able to figure out what you want and your needs and make that happen. And ultimately, this part of a business is one of the most important things to think about. So,
Yeah.
like you said, take that hour, figure
Yeah.
it out. use resources, right? Go talk to you. That's what this podcast is for.
Sure.
Ultimately, is for us all to have resources to achieve those things.
Yeah.
And really, come talk to us, right? That's I ask everyone who listens, just comment. We are here to help. All my guests are the only ones that I vet out and say, hey, we're here to help, and they're going to help you, right? They're not going to charge you an arm or leg. Sometimes it's just a little bit of guidance. That's all we need. And so, hey, everybody, reach out to Tracy at Exitable. Obviously, we'll have all our socials and everything, but ultimately, figure out what you want to do. Be aware of how you want to exit, and you can get it done.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you did that better than I did. Good job.
The preceding program was sponsored by Black Mammoth. Any awards, rankings, or recognition by unaffiliated third parties or publications are in no way indicative of the advisor's future performance or any individual client's investment success. No award, ranking, or recognition should be construed as a current or past endorsement of Black Mammoth. Information regarding specific awards, rankings, or recognitions is available on the Black Mammoth website, www.blackmammoth.com. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. Investment strategies such as asset allocation, diversification, or rebalancing do not assure or guarantee better performance and cannot eliminate the risk of investment losses. There are no guarantees that a portfolio employing these or any other strategy will outperform a portfolio that does not engage in such strategies. This broadcast should not be construed by any client or prospective client as a solicitation to effect or attempt to effect transactions and securities or the rendering of personalized investment advice due to various factors including changing market conditions. The information discussed in this broadcast may no longer be reflective of current positions or recommendations. While information presented is believed to be factual and up-to-date, Black Mammoth do not guarantee its accuracy, and it should not be regarded as a complete analysis of the subjects discussed. The tax and estate planning information discussed is general in nature and is provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Listeners should consult an attorney or tax professional regarding their specific legal or tax situation. Past performance is not indicative of future results.